Wisconsin at Iowa. Marco, what should bettors be looking at?
The big question is, can Wisconsin avoid the flat spot after upsetting number 1 Ohio State? I say they can, and the reason, they're playing a team in Iowa that they've got major revenge from last year, and this is going to go a long way in the Big Ten championship, this game.
Now tell me about that revenge.
Last year, at home, Iowa beat them. Don't have my score right here in front of me, but they beat them, I think, by 20 points. It was a big margin. This is a game for Wisconsin. Last week, everybody saw, and this is what the public's going to think, South Carolina upset Alabama the week before, and then last week went on the road to Kentucky and lost. Two differences. This is a revenge game, as we already said, but South Carolina was a favorite on the road, where Wisconsin's an underdog on the road. And when I handicap, there's different mentalities. When you're a favorite,
there's more inclination to maybe be a little lax in your preparation, especially if you're off a big win.
Absolutely. But when you're the underdog, people are telling you you're not as good, so you've got something to prove. And that's why I think the motivation will be there, that Wisconsin will have their heads screwed on straight, and the fact they saw what happened to South Carolina. You don't want to do that same thing. So the coaches will drill that into them all week long. Wisconsin, I love their offense. It's a balanced offense, running, passing the ball. They play power football. And to be quite honest with you, looking at this Iowa team, they've got a great record. I'm not totally sold on them yet. I think they're a little bit of an overrated commodity because, to me, they've played two big games, Arizona and Michigan. And last week, Michigan lost to Nard Robinson, in that game, the injury.
Even so, Iowa was outgained in that game by almost 150 yards. So Michigan, with the second-string quarterback, a significant chunk of the game, outgained them 150 yards. Now, here's what's interesting. What do you think? Right now, this line's 5.5?
The line is 5.5, correct.
What would you say the line was in the preseason? And really, the comparison between the preseason line and the current line is really the net difference in the assessment of these teams.
Right.
So, for example, if both teams are 1 unit better, then the line's going to be the same. If one team's 1 unit better and one team's 1 unit worse, then the one team's going to be significantly more of a favor. How would you say the net opinion of these teams has evolved from preseason?
Coming into this season, I would have put these two teams at even, Iowa and Wisconsin, so basically Iowa would be home field advantage. I would have put this game preseason-wise about 3.5.
And do you think it's legitimate? Hey, Dustin, you want to hit the F5 errors we're running? Do you think that it's legitimate that not only is it now 2.5 points to the net favor of Iowa, but you're coming off a 3? You're actually absolutely right. It was Iowa 3 preseason. Does that what makes that, with Wisconsin off of beating the number 1 team, can you really say Wisconsin's underperformed, or is Iowa overperformed, or what's going on?
It goes back to what I just said before you led into that. I think the public perception of Iowa is overrated. I'm not thrilled with the schedule that they've played. They've beat everybody but Arizona, the game that they went out early in the season, had to travel to the West Coast. They played a competitive game.
I guess I'm not hearing you. Do you think it's legitimate that Iowa's considered now 2.5 points better relative to Wisconsin than preseason?
I don't agree with that.
Why do people think it? Because you're saying they're not catching the fact that Michigan outgained them 150 yards, and they're overvaluing how good Arizona is, so they're making that loss less significant? What's going on?
I think when they look at the Michigan game last week, RJ, people have a tendency to just look at scores. They don't dig down into the box scores.
So you're saying deceiving box score?
Yeah, I mean, what's even more deceiving is, like you said, they were outgained by 150 yards. That's a significant number. What's more significant is the fact Michigan had over 500 yards of offense. I mean, that was significant without Nard Robinson in there.
Now, I got to tell you, my gut feeling agrees with you, but that I was a little overrated, and there's value with Wisconsin. Most of the stats actually go the other way, so let's talk about those. Actually, Vegas has Iowa as number 9 in the country in their odds makers poll, and BCS has them 15. So actually, there's a 6-point difference saying, or 6-spot difference, saying Iowa's fairly underrated. Now, what's interesting is Wisconsin's 13 in the BCS. So Iowa's 15, Wisconsin's 13. So they're actually saying, the BCS is saying Wisconsin's a slightly better team, which reinforces Vegas doesn't care about that stuff. Vegas trusts its opinion. So you disagree with Vegas. I mean, you wouldn't put Iowa number 9 in your rankings.
This game, as you're saying all of that, it reminded me of a game earlier in the season that we did on the videos, and that was Florida State and Miami of Florida. And it was the same scenario. Vegas and everybody else thought that Miami.
Well, in that case, they thought both teams were underrated relatively.
But most people they were really high on Miami of Florida. And I just think Iowa, they're too high on this team right now.
Who's we? The odds makers?
The odds makers.
Okay. Now, here's two things that or I guess technically make me like Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1-8 ATS, so only 1 out of 9 ATS in this series. So Iowa's just beating them almost every time for almost a decade. At some point, that becomes meaningful. And this is a rivalry, you would say. Though, unless I'm mistaken, these two teams are going to be in opposite sides of the Big Ten now, the divisions, and they won't be playing on a yearly basis. So this is the last time they're going to be playing on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
How does that make it a more important game, a less important game?
What makes it an important game to me, I'm not worrying about down the road. I'm looking at for this year. Even if both teams have one loss, which Wisconsin has one loss coming into this game, if they win this game, Wisconsin can still control their own destiny pretty much.
So both teams are motivated.
Absolutely.
All right, so how do you deal with the 1-8 in the series?
It's a factor that I look at, but it doesn't deter me from what I see with current form on the two teams.
All right, Wisconsin has a great home field. We saw that against Ohio State. Wisconsin is 3-13 ATS on the road. 3 of 13, so 3-10 on the road against winning teams. So if they go on the road and they can dominate physically, they're fine. They go against a team that's comparable to them, they've only covered 3 of 13, which seems to reinforce that there's a real dichotomy with them between home and road.
I agree with the numbers that you're putting out.
Are you ready to go against yourself here a little bit?
No, I'm going to take.
So this is a pure value play.
This is a value play for me because, again, and this is almost like the conversation that we had. You know, it's like deja vu with the Florida State, Miami, Florida. I just firmly believe the Iowa team is overrated.
Yeah.
Where
I
it's
think
at.
you're right, but I think that maybe the line should be 3.5. Let's say it like this. On a neutral, I'm not sure this shouldn't be pick 'em. But then if you add up Wisconsin being a poor road team, you add up Wisconsin off the win, it almost makes more sense to be around 4. And then at that point, I'm not sure there's a lot of value.
The reason that people are looking at Iowa in this situation over the Wisconsin, they're looking at the one road game that Wisconsin had that's comparable. They went to Michigan State, and they got beat up at Michigan State. They lost by 10. The difference in that game is there was a big motivational point in that game. That was the week where the coach was supposed to come back. He was at practice. Then he had the blood clot in the leg, and they put him back in the hospital, the Michigan State head coach.
I understand.
So Michigan State was playing with, hey, win one for the Gipper type thing.
Or you could say it's the opposite, which is they don't have their head coach.
Well,
see, that's what's dangerous. I liked what you did a minute ago. You said that's a valid point, but I'm making a value play, and I think the value is bigger than those points. But to double back and rationalize that somehow, if I liked Iowa, I could say Wisconsin got beat by double digits and the other team didn't have their coach. So there's clearly two ways to look at that, and it's dangerous, I think, to always reverse engineer what opinion you want.
But the situation where you say like double back, look at the schedule, that is a big part of my handicapping. When I go back through the season logs and I go through the ebb and flow of the season.
But I agree with you there. That approach and your ability to do that, I think, is elite. The ability to dig a little deeper into a team's record and say, well, they really, people are looking at this 10-point loss, but it was deceiving. If you go, really that's what you're saying here is that some of these results are deceiving. If you tell me that the fact that Iowa outgained Michigan or they were outgained by almost 150 yards against Michigan with a second-string quarterback, that does tell me, hey, that was probably a deceiving score. But to say Michigan State not having their head coach was an advantage for Michigan State, that feels like voodoo handicapping to me.
Well, we can agree to disagree.
All right, so give us your official projection.
I have Wisconsin winning 23-20 on Saturday.
And let me be very clear about this, because anyone who might be a new viewer of this show might say, wow, RJ doesn't respect, they might not know it's RJ until the little thing comes up, is RJ doesn't really respect Margaret. I think you're one of the best handicappers in the world. I think what you sometimes do on the show, what we got to get away from, is you've got maybe a single reason you like a game, value, and then because we want to fill up 6 minutes or whatever, which we don't, because these can be 2 minutes if that's what we have to say, I don't want you to start reaching for concepts that aren't valid. So let's just take one more minute. Do you really believe the fact that Michigan State not having their head coach was an advantage to Michigan State? Because if so, I think that Urban Meyer should skip the next game and let's see what happens. Florida.
It goes back to theories that I have with the injured player theory and different concepts that we totally disagree every time that subject comes up of how teams react in adverse situations. And if you remember, a couple weeks ago, again, which I'll point out where I was right, you were wrong, Kevin Cobb for Philadelphia, I said going on the road that week to San Francisco was going to be the best thing, and it was the best situation that he was coming back and getting the starting job, and the guy has been lights out both weeks since he got the job back.
But would you say his performance in the San Francisco game was strong?
Yes, it was very strong. They went downfield in that game.
That wasn't the way I saw that. But I guess we can dig a little deeper into that. They certainly covered and won the game. Okay, good stuff, and it's good when we disagree because it allows the viewers to decide what they think.
Right. And usually I get to see me be right.
Now it's your turn to continue the conversation in the comment section with Marco and me. And next up, we're going to be talking LSU at Auburn.